we specifically asked our audience if they had questions about toys. I know that one of the people on our live feature wanted to know, do you have a favorite toy that you like to use working with very small children? Is there something in particular?
Well, I mean, you know, developmentally, our kids have different interests at different ages. Actually, our entire play curriculum is organized in a way that kind of goes with the age of development. And when you have younger kids, a lot of the time they're very interested in just what we call cause and effect toys. So toys that you can press something or, you know, move a button or whatever, and the toy will light up or will make some sort of music or something. And as the child ages a little bit, then children tend to get more interested in constructive toys, so things that allow you to produce something like art and crafts types toys or those types of things, and or Legos, you know, things that you can use to build. And then it isn't until, and this will vary a great deal, but it's, you know, past the age of, I think, 3 or so, where we start to actually get into pretend type activity and pretend play toys. And I think that tends to be one of the areas that our kids are very deficient in, is just imagination and pretend. And so I think it benefits a lot of our kids if parents try to get them things that have to do with dressing up or, you know, becoming part of a character, puppets, that type of thing are useful toys that can help in a lot of different instructional things. I do want to say that you generally, for parents, you should be careful not to, if you're buying toys that are kind of have what we call self-stimulatory toys, you know, toys that have the propensity to encourage the child to just self-stimulate and not socialize, that you might want to stay away from those toys, because a lot of times our kids tend to become a little bit more, you know, intrinsic and don't interact, and they just repeatedly will do something with a toy that allows them to just self-stimulate in that fashion. And toys that promote social behavior are probably a little bit more useful. We have right now, and I don't know how far we've developed this, but on iTunes, on the iTunes library, we have our store. We have what's called Camp Discovery, and this is sort of the beginning of us trying to develop games and applications for kids. And so these are very basic, just sort of, you know, drag and drop labeling type games for the very young, very, very young kids. But the reason we've developed these, and they're free right now, so I would encourage people to get those for their kids as well. But the reason that we did this is because, or what makes these games different from other online types of activities, is that all of the procedures behind discrete trial are kind of programmed in, so that you know, the child will receive a stimulus and then distractors and then additional target stimuli, and the rotation and the presentation of the stimuli, and what you see on the screen is kind of similar to how a therapist would present things in that order, and or in that 7-step series that we do during discrete trial. So that might be useful, and as I said, it is free. Yeah, I know it is a difficult time. I mean, first of all, I think during the holidays we also, not only do we want to go all out for our kids and buy tons and tons of things, but also it's the time where our kids start to take in massive amounts of sugar, which is also something to be careful about right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And with the sugar comes all the artificial colors too, and a lot of times kids will have, you know, one color in particular that it doesn't sit well. Certainly not all kids, but some kids that'll happen.
Right.
So yeah, things to be watching out for.
You know, our Claudia, who is our main receptionist for cards, she put together a really good list for Halloween, which was a list of all the candy that is, you know, less harmful. Let's put it that way. And it's gluten-free stuff and casein-free stuff. And she listed it as a huge list, and she says which companies and so on. And we should probably put that up somewhere for our viewers.
We'd love to have that on our Facebook.
Yeah, it was a really good list.
I know that, you know, those companies then we can continue to use it at holiday time. Remarkable. And sort of keeping what somebody wrote in on Facebook and said, and I don't know whether they're looking for a toy or just help for, but you mentioned social things. They're wanting help for young teens with emotional health problems connected with autism and occurring alongside OCD and ADHD. So I don't know that we necessarily need to keep it in the context of toys because we're talking about teens, but you know, what kind of support would you advocate for?
Yeah,
those kids?
I'm happy that next week, I think it's
next week, and thank you for reminding me.
Sure, we're doing a program. Our show will be completely about anxiety, and of course OCD is very much related to anxiety. It is one of the toughest things. It's not something at all that it possibly could increase during the holidays, but it is a very difficult subject, and there's too many factors involved where I could give any kind of decent answer here that would be helpful. But I do really suggest that if you have a teen who has anxiety or obsessive compulsive behavior, which is sort of an indication of anxiety, that you do get professional help, because in a lot of situations our teens we kind of overlook the anxiety or the OCD because it's not as bad as just pure autism or let's say other things that we've dealt with our kids, but it is, and it will get worse. It's pretty important to pay attention to symptoms of anxiety and to obsessive compulsive behaviors, because they tend to actually get worse and turn into depression after a while, or even simultaneously.
Yeah.
So, and there are really, I mean, you can, depending on the level of the child, you can get a lot of help for the child. A lot of times I feel for our adolescents, it's just teaching our adolescents to understand certain things. Mm-hmm. They misunderstand because of the social deficit or the problems they have in reading social cues. Mm-hmm. They tend to misunderstand, and they tend to see things as being intentional, or they feel more lonely than they should, or they don't really understand that everything's fine. They kind of misinterpret social things, and once we teach them to interpret those things more properly, it helps them, but not always, because sometimes they're just going through typical teen stuff. I mean, and a lot of teenagers go through a phase that's very difficult due to, performance anxiety, or am I good enough? And as you can imagine, that's even more perpetuated with our teens.
Sure.
I see that happening with our kids as they become more and more aware. They're very concerned about fitting in, mm-hmm. And that is what leads to a lot of anxiety and depression, I think.
Absolutely. So a lot of things to think about, and we're going to talk more about that next Wednesday.
Yes.
That entire show next Wednesday about anxiety, and you guys can start sending in questions. We've got a great question about helping toys and things to put in a room, to put on the wall to help a 10-year-old go to sleep. We're going to take a break and we'll come back and talk about that. And our guest in the next hour, Uncle Milton, they specialize in this. So you're going to love that. So stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. I love this. This is my very first question in French, and I'm very excited about it. I know just enough French to get myself in trouble, as you probably just heard. Okay, we wanted to start with a question that came in on our Facebook. I love it when you guys write in questions on the live feature in Facebook. Somebody wants to know, what can I put in a 10-year-old's room to help sleep easier for sensory, like lighted decorative rope, sand, water, and I have a curtain to help with light, but what else? I mentioned that we're going to have a guest in the next hour that sort of specializes in this, and during the break I was saying what we had put in Jem's room, which is something that came out from Uncle Milton, and you were saying that it's a product that you're very familiar with.
Yeah,
and
my
that your
son had it as well, right?
It's called the Moon in My Room.
Right, it's a circle, mm-hmm. and it changes over the sequence of moon moon phases. So it's a half moon and then becomes gradually a full moon, and you can control it with a remote control, and it's something that kids like very much, so it helps them stay in their room. I'm not sure if it helps with sleep, because the bigger thing with sleep is that, you know, one of the most influential factors on sleep is just light. Anything that produces light can interrupt sleep. And so the thing I like about this product is that when you go to just a very partial moon, it has very little light, and that was very helpful for my son when he was growing up. There are a lot of products right now that are just, for instance, one thing you might want to consider is, I had done this also for my kids, was I had gotten those stars that glow in the dark, and I had put it all over their ceiling, and so during the day they would get enough light that at night when I turned off the lights, you could see them, but they wouldn't be so much that they disturb your sleep, and they would gradually fade away, but they were there for at least an hour after dark, and they were beautiful, you know. So my kids were really looking forward to having the lights turned off so they could see the stars. That's one thing. Music, of course, is something that really, really helps with sleep. So talking about sensory and how to calm children down. There's, again, this has a lot to do with the level of the child, level of functioning of the child. There is an application, I don't remember the name of it exactly, but basically you bring it up on your iPhone and you put your iPhone under the mattress, and it will feel movements, and when you have movements it will gently start to play a little music.
Oh, love that.
So that it kind of helps the child go, you know, calm down again,
So
those types of
clever.
things. There's so much stuff right now for sleep,
And honestly, in the next hour when Uncle Milton comes in, as we mentioned, the moon in my room, but for younger kids now, we're gonna give away one of the wall friends. They come in different characters.
That's awesome.
It's like the moon in my room, that it goes into the wall, but it has different modes of light so that it gets dimmer.
See,
and
perfect.
it actually, with the remote, they can have it talk to them and play some music.
That's awesome.
So it's incredible.
And also, Shannon, I have to say that a lot of our kids do, so if you kind of put pillows around the child and try to make them feel very, I don't know, cozy, or, you know, like put the pillows very close to the child, it influences their sleep, because maybe they feel a little bit more secure. And smell, the sense of smell tends to also, that's why a lot of people like candles. Obviously candles are not really safe for our kids, but there are these little things that give off scent. I don't know. You know,
they have flameless candles now too.
Oh, that's true. No, but these are the ones that you plug in and they smell really good. And certain scents can be conditioned to relaxation, and I think that's also very helpful for sleep.
Very cool. And I just realized, sitting next to me, I have Read With Me Violet, and we have Read With Me Scout too. That we're going to be talking about this with Leapfrog. Now, this is obviously for the younger kids. This child is 11 that you asked the question about, but this has a whole mode that it reads books with the child, and then you put it on the sleep mode, and so that it just plays lullabies for a set period of time, and then shuts off.
Oh my God.
And all the interactive portions of it, when it's on sleep mode, won't happen, so that the child can cuddle it and it won't start talking to them.
I should get one of those for one of our supervisors who just had a baby. That's awesome. The things that are out now.
This thing is absolutely, I'm not going to trigger it because it has all these little things and it will play all these little tunes, and we're going to wait and talk about that with Leapfrog when they're here in the next hour. Okay, I wanted to go to a question about skills, because as you know, we're giving away a skills subscription in this hour. For Dr. Doreen, I'm currently a skills user and I'm loving it. I have currently worked out about 27 hours per week of therapy with my child. My question is, what amount of hours, how many programs should I be doing at one time? My child is very quick learner and is running through programs quite well.
Great.
I'm currently focusing on language, social, and motor. I've just started peeking into the play lessons because I know that is important. My child is in kindergarten, and I feel like I need to also tackle academics as well, but I'm unsure of how much we, in capital letters, can handle. His teachers are concerned mainly when it comes to him being able to answer WH questions when a story is involved, which goes beyond me simply asking, what is this? It seems like the kindergarten curriculum has changed as they are learning about many abstract things my child just isn't ready for. Any advice you can give is so appreciated. Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, great question, and thank you for writing in, because it makes me feel so good that there are parents that are using skills and that it's useful to them. So a few things. I'm assuming if your child's in kindergarten or about to go into kindergarten, we're talking your child's age is somewhere around 4, maybe 5, and you definitely should be doing some work in the language curriculum. I don't know if you noted did they say
they said language, social, and motor,
Great.
and just starting to dip into play.
So you will want to do a lot of, so you're focused with about, let's assume you have somewhere around 27 hours. That's over the course of the week. Let's say about 25 hours, even a couple of hours for you to review and stuff. And so you're talking about, if we try to go 5 days a week, you're talking about if we go, 4 or 5 hours a day is what you have. I would do sessions that are approximately no longer than 2 hours in length each. So I would do 2 hours, then a break, 2 hours, or something like that, or an hour and a half, then an hour break. So typically, like, you'd want to go, let's say 9 to 10:30, and then, or if you have school, then a lot of this sort of stuff would be happening after school. But you do about an hour and a half session, and then you'll have about an hour off, or an hour and a half off, and then you'll come back and do another hour and a half. So you kind of sort of want to fill the day that way. And in about 25 hours, you should be able to do a pretty decent full program, which means that you will have maybe one motor program, one play program, probably 3 or 4 language programs, 1 or 2 social. If you are beginning to get worried about academic, you could add an academic, although your child is pretty young. The program that you talked about, the WH, is in reading comprehension or listening comprehension. And I think listening comprehension, it would be it's either an academic or social. I'm not sure where it is.
I think it's an academic.
Is it an
I'm
academic?
pretty sure it's an academic.
Right. And that lesson is there, so that can guide you through that. But it does have the prerequisite of the basic WHs, yes. And then you would want to answer the questions for the EF cognition curricula areas so that you can see if your child has some deficits there and you want to start working on those. Yes, play, of course, you should have, as I said, 1. The key, when you go through the first few years of intervention at about 25 hours, you're always going to be heavier on language and social than anything else. Some of our kids have more of a deficit in other areas, and then we want to try to catch them up. Obviously, you're going to want to do maybe 1 program or 2 from adaptive as well, and that really just has to do with your child's abilities. I assume the child's already, for instance, potty trained. That becomes very important. But and you'll see as you start going into some of the adaptive stuff that it'll also help with when your child is actually having to get up, get dressed, get ready, brush teeth, all that sort of stuff comes in as well. But really, the more you focus right now on language and social, I think those are the 2 areas that your child's going to benefit from. And then, of course, academic. We want our kids to do well when they start kindergarten. And then, for academic, there's a lot of other stuff out there. If your child has free time and they want to play, I would really recommend that you do go on let's say, iTunes store, look at some apps that are out there. There's a lot that your child can do just to learn. Like a lot of these games will teach you basic academic stuff as well. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, this, in fact, I don't want to give it away because we're going to demo this later, but this comes with 5 books, and it reads the book to your child, and it asks a question at the end of every page.
See, that's perfect.
That deals
and
with
a lot of the Leapfrog actually do that. The Leapfrog programs all do that. Yeah, they are really brilliant. Yeah, they're very, very good.
Yeah, really
So
remarkable.
those things will be very helpful. I mean, Leapfrogs has done so much with teaching our kids. They really have fabulous products for this type of thing. And I'm so glad to hear that this parent is enjoying skills and going forward this way.
And I wonder if they realize that the Camp Discovery app that Dr. Granpeesheh was talking about earlier dovetails into skills that you can actually have, like in addition to your 27 hours that you're doing, you can have your child spending, like if you're cooking dinner and you want to get a little bit more time in, you can give the iPad or whatever to the child. The child can be playing on Camp Discovery, and if you put in your skills ID, it will track what their responses are as well into skills. It's kind of remarkable. So another benefit if you're using skills to be able to use Camp, you don't have to have a skills account to use Camp Discovery, but it will be compatible with it if you are. So pretty remarkable. It's an exciting time for a 5-year-old, and I think it's great that you're getting a lot of stuff done. And great question. Would you like to take a break, or are you ready for another?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Doreen. I have an 11-year-old son with high-functioning autism. One of our issues is that when we take him anywhere, he will walk up to anyone and start talking to them. He will introduce himself with his full name, age, and where he goes to school. Then he will continue to start talking about whatever subject is on his mind at that moment. He usually targets adults, but not always. He has no concept of stranger danger. He has seen videos, done role modeling, been told repeatedly not to talk to strangers. Nothing seems to break through to make him understand. This is causing embarrassing moments and also terrible stress on us because we're afraid he's going to talk to the wrong person and be gone forever. Please help. Very serious question.
Yes, very serious and very well worded, because you basically went through and explained several different areas that all come together and produce this problem. To begin with, when we try to approach these situations and we don't break it apart and we just try to model for the child, we don't want you to talk to strangers, it doesn't really make sense to our kids, and they don't generalize it to all different situations, so they tend to do the same thing over and over. But you really defined well and divided all the different areas, and I'd like to go through your email again, because you listed several key things, and as you went through, I was like, okay, we have that program, we have that program, we have, and I truly recommend that you do go to Skills and you do get a subscription to Skills. It will guide you and be very helpful to you, because all of these areas are addressed there, and as we go through your email, I'll tell you exactly what they're called and where they are. So Shannon, could you read that just again, the area, just
so starting with one of our issues is that when we take him anywhere, he will walk up to anyone and start
talking to strangers. That in itself is there's a whole program, I think, called Levels of Friendship, and it takes you through and explains to the child through multiple steps, and none of these programs are a one-time thing. They're things that are multi-step, so there's several different levels to each of the programs that I'm about to mention. So this one, for instance, makes you understand that your behavior towards people is different based on who they are. And first, it helps you to identify if someone is a friend, a best friend, an acquaintance, a relation, a parent's friend, an adult that you have to respect, like a teacher or something, and it helps you learn how you behave differently with each one. So that's one aspect of that. The other aspect of it is actually having the appropriate conversational skills. So I think your child will go up and start talking to them. He'll start with telling them his full name and stuff that's not appropriate, right? So that is in the social curriculum, because it really does teach our kids how to what they look like and how much information you should actually present. And I think that's called greetings and salutations. Greetings and salutations. And that program will help your child understand what is an appropriate way to greet those different people. Now, talking about his own subject, I think, because he goes on and talks about what his favorite subject.
He will continue to start talking about whatever subject is on his mind at that moment.
Right. And that that shows that he has sort of a theory of mind deficit, or a cognitive deficit, social cognition deficit, which means he's not really thinking how people perceive him. He's not quite aware of their minds, their perceptions. So he doesn't have that kind of embarrassment or ability to see that people would consider this odd, or would not be interested in his subject. And that all comes from the entire area of the program called cognition. And when you go into cognition, you'll see a whole ton of lessons and just multiple areas having to do with the deficit of perspective taking, understanding other people's perspectives. And in order for him to really understand that, and all of your whole problem has to do with his inability to see other people's perspectives. But in order to teach a child that, you really have to start with very basic things, like what is your sensory perspective, your visual perspective, what are the things you see and I see, and noticing that we have different visual perspectives, different things we hear. And then that goes on to different things we learn or believe or think, and then that gradually just takes you into how everybody's mind is separated, and then interests, and what our desires are, what our preferences are, what our interests are. These are individual lessons, and they all have multiple steps, and your child really needs to go into that, because I'm pretty sure that with an awareness of other people have their own minds and they have their own interests, he would probably be a little bit more cautious about the conversation and what he's throwing out at people. Now, having said, so that's another area. Then on top of that, there's a whole different area of social conversation in our social curriculum, which has to do with teaching all the kind of logistical issues with conversation, and they have to do with learning to look at other people's facial expressions, for instance, and understanding when someone is bored or thinking you're weird, or wanting to walk away, and how do you react to those situations, and how do you help maintain a conversation, how do you help repair it if the conversation gets cut off or goes somewhere else, how do you end appropriately, how do you start appropriately. All of these are within the social conversation lesson. So I named probably 6 or 7 areas of our curriculum, and they're all very, very big areas. So that's why you would really, really benefit if you go into skills. This is the key to skills. It gives you all of these things, but it doesn't give them to you all at the same time. It's kind of, if you just go through and answer the questions in the index or the assessment area of skills, you'll see that it'll identify for you, of all the things I just named and hundreds more that are in skills, it'll tell you kind of which ones should be taught first and what order, so that by the time your child gets to the most complex, which is really how should I have a good conversation with my peers, they've already gotten all the building blocks to get there.
Yeah, it is.
Otherwise,
it's
just too complex a skill to want to be able to teach a child through modeling. They have all these other things they need to know before that. So.
Yeah, really remarkable. And again, if you go to skillsforautism.com, you can go there and you can do a trial. There are 2 different kinds of trials that you can do that I believe are 14 days. One where you get access to the whole program for 14 days. If you register with a credit card, on the 15th day it will charge your credit card if you don't cancel it. And if you don't want to do that, because some people don't want to give a credit card to look at something, there is another trial that you can do without a credit card for 14 days. It just doesn't give you access to everything, but it gives you a great ability to go in and look around and see what is there, to see exactly what Dr. Granpeesheh is talking about. I use skills at home, and I have found it to be the single greatest empowering tool that isn't in the body of a person for autism.
Great.
So
Well, new stuff's coming out soon too.
And I'm very excited about that. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back with more of Dr. Granpeesheh answering your questions for Ask Dr. Doreen. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We had our very first question come in French. It's very exciting to me. Dr. Granpeesheh has looked at it, and she does not slaughter it like I do, but we'll give you the translation, which I believe is, how do you get an infant to take an object? An infant with autism.
Right. And bonjour, bienvenue for our French audience. That's very nice of you to join us. So there are, again, there's many different ways to teach taking an object or giving an object. And the basic... The easiest way, I mean, any book you take right now, any book that you purchase on ABA or Applied Behavior Analysis will definitely guide you through the basic, it might be called receptive commands, it might be called object labels. Some people will just call it "give me." It could be. I mean, there are different names, but essentially, this is the very easiest thing to teach. And even our Camp Discovery program on iTunes Library also does that. It doesn't help the child give, but it does help the child identify. And so giving is just a form of touching, or it's a response that we consider to be receptive because it doesn't involve language on behalf of the child. So what you do is you just present one object in front of the child, and you will tell the child to either give the object or touch the object, and you can prompt it, you can model it, and it's just one object, and you can model it from just having the child's hand and putting the child's hand on the object all the way to just looking at it, which is a very minimal prompt. Once the child has consistently learned to touch the object, then you will bring in another item, which is a distractor. And you won't label that item. So you will just put it on the table. So let's say we're teaching cup.
I've got an extra mouse.
And I'll have the child touch cup, or give cup. And after that, I'm bringing another object on the table, but I'm still asking for cup only. So I'll still say touch cup or give cup. And then I'll rotate the positions. So touch cup, and then the child will touch. And you want to make sure you're not prompting the child anymore. And once you've done that a few times, and you might even have another distractor, you don't necessarily have to, but you're still asking for cup, then you put cup away, and you'll bring a new object in. And this new object will now have a name again, so pen. And you'll start alone, and you'll do the same thing, so touch pen, and then you'll bring a distractor in again, an object that you're not naming. And you'll rotate that physically, and the child will give you pen. And then the true measure of learning is when you rotate, this is random rotation, the first two target objects that were taught. So that is cup now and pen. And so you'll present them together, and you'll say touch pen or touch cup. And if the child gets it correct, wonderful, you're done. If the child doesn't get it correct, then you will go to various forms of prompting, perhaps put the object closer to the child. You might even go back to just presenting it with a distractor until you're able to rotate these two objects. Once you're able to rotate the first two target objects, then any object after that goes through the same procedure, and then the child starts to learn pretty rapidly. And that's the basic, very, very basic discrete trial formats for teaching objects. And you can start doing this very, very early on. We do it with really young children because sometimes it's just a matter of we don't even expect them to actually hand us the object. We just expect them to point to. And we're trying very early on to teach pointing. And of course, these programs are all in skills and in, I think at this point they'd be in the language curriculum and under object labels, I think. So it's very easy lessons and would probably be very helpful. Now, it's interesting because I've been thinking that that we're translating everything into Spanish right now, and God willing, we will someday get through skills as well because it's so massive. But I also do have a very dear friend who's French, and we're thinking about having her come here and spend a year or two just translating everything into French. So, I'm interested to see if we actually have more viewers and listeners who are French-speaking in any of the French-speaking countries.
Heaven knows they need some help in France with autism.
Everywhere, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know, as we look at countries that are particularly behind the time in thinking about how to help autism, France is pretty behind the time.
Yeah, that's very true. It's absolutely right.
So,
it's true.
Really remarkable. And I have to say, too, as a parent and as a former teacher, watching this idea of putting something in front of it and prompting and then doing the mass trial, as you call it, and then the random rotation, it seems ridiculous. It seems you go, no, that can't be the thing.
Why do you want to do all that?
That can't be the thing that works.
Right.
My child won't respond to that. That can't be the thing that works. I have thought that as a parent myself, and I've heard so many other parents say, clearly that's not going to work. Right. I had said, you're not going to be able to get my child to sit up to do that, and then I watched them make that happen through a series of different things that they did, and I am a true convert now, because what she just showed you very quickly is an amazing way to teach anyone anything.
Yeah, it's something that we sort of put together, and it's not even really the people refer to discrete trial, and this is kind of the card version of discrete trial. We call it sort of the 7-step thing. You can do it faster in 3 steps or 5 steps, but we do it pretty generally because in this format, because it really does work, Shannon, and it helps the child not get confused. We have to realize that a lot of times we put objects in front of our kids and we just, I remember many years ago, a couple of our senior supervisors did this training for our staff, and they were, when they were presenting instruction, and they wanted our staff to understand how difficult it is for the kids, and so they were placing objects in front and just saying blah 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 blah, and the truth is our kids might be hearing that. And it's important to realize that they're not just learning new objects, they're learning a language. And so to be able to teach it to them this way is pretty important. It works, and it's clear, and it's concise, and it allows the child to go as fast as they like.
Absolutely. Now, somebody had written in a little bit further on the last question, for the skills question from the other parent. They said therapist comes for 4 hours daily. Lessons are about 14 per session. What would perfect world scenario look like as far as breaks? Also, what is your best advice recommendation to make sure that therapists are doing what they're supposed to with your child? And they said, thank you for your time. We love you.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That is for you.
Could you read the first part first again?
And I want to make sure that I've got it in the right context. They're saying that further on the skills question from the other parent, and I'm guessing that they're saying that their therapist comes for 4 hours daily, that lessons are about 14 per session, and that they want to know what would the perfect world scenario look like as far as breaks. Also, what is your best advice recommendation to make sure that therapists are doing what they're supposed to with your child?
Right, so I'll try to, hopefully I got this straight. The therapist is coming 4 hours a day, and assuming it's 5 days a week, it's 20 hours. And a lot of times we're constrained by the therapist's schedules. So if you have a therapist that's coming 4 straight hours and you can't split them, so in other words, you can't have this is what we do, right? We have our therapist go 2 hours, and then another therapist goes 2 hours later for another 2-hour session. But you can't split them. That's perfectly fine, because what you could do is you could do an hour and a half of actual work. Then the therapist can do more play type activity from skills for a half an hour, and then come back and do another hour and a half. Having said that, it just depends on your child's age as well and how difficult the lessons are. 14 lessons seems to be a good number for that type of session. It depends on what lessons they are. there's a really good balance when you have a good session going on, where you basically you just want to make sure your child's happy, they're not getting tired, they're not getting frustrated, they're kind of challenged yet enjoying it.
Yeah.
My mic keeps moving, sorry. And and your therapist, 4 hours is a pretty long time, so you want to make sure your therapist isn't getting tired and so on. If you have one therapist, this is all you can do and just go for it. But if you have two, I'd rotate them if possible and have one therapist do mornings and one therapist do afternoons. That way you just kind of have more energy coming into it. How to evaluate if a therapist, I would videotape sessions. With our staff now, all of our staff have these iPads because we have an internal program for inputting data on the iPads, and a lot of times we have the therapist just place the iPad so that the supervisors can just see on FaceTime what's going on.
Wow.
And so it's so easy these days to put an iPhone or an iPad up, and so you can see everything on FaceTime. Or you could just videotape the whole session and then probe it. You don't need to watch, obviously, 4 hours a day, but I would watch, segments here and there, 15, 20-minute segments here and there. That tends to keep therapists on their toes. I also would recommend that you continue to give refreshers to your therapist. Like, what we do is we have a weekly or every second week what we call clinic. And clinic is where the whole team gets together and shows what they've been doing. This is the most important thing. It's so important that a lot of our funding sources won't pay for it because they don't want 3-4 therapists and a supervisor all in the same 2-hour time frame with the family, because they don't want to pay for 4 people at the same time. But we don't care. We kind of eat that card and we just do it, because clinic is where the supervisor and the parent gets to see who knows what they're really doing. Otherwise, you could have therapists just kind of like putting in data that's not really accurate, or they could be just drifting off. One time I saw, I had asked the parent to videotape someone else's sessions. I was just doing an evaluation for the parent, and I saw that their therapist was literally balancing their checkbook while they were supposed to be doing therapy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. So it's really important every week, if you can, to get together for just an hour or 2 hours and have every therapist go through and demonstrate every lesson. You don't have, if you have 14 lessons, you could rotate them and just have one therapist do 7 and another therapist do 7, and you can see everything. That way you're sure that everyone's consistent and that they're doing actually what they're supposed to be doing. Your child's reaction to the therapist is what lets you know how involved that therapist is or how good they are. Because if a therapist has been sort of not really doing their job, your child's going to have a reaction, not a good reaction. If your therapist has really been diligent and working well, then your child's going to jump on board and just do great with the therapist at clinic. So clinic is really where things come to fruition, and everybody talks, and that's where you decide what the problems are, how to change lessons. Sometimes with our kids, they're not learning until we make things more visual, or various other things, and it's a very important part of treatment. So I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, our clinics were sacred to us. Nothing, and over the years, the time that it was and the day that it was changed, and the rest of the world knew that is immovable. We're not available to do anything else at that time because it's so powerful at charting the progress.
Right.
Absolutely essential. And I will say too that it was suggested to us by another family, a video monitor, a video baby monitor.
Yes.
And anybody who came into our home, we said, we're watching and listening in the other room. And I would love to lie to you and tell you that I listened to every moment and that I watched every moment, but that would be a lie, right? Across 5 years of therapy, but it was always playing in the background. And what I picked up while I was doing other work was so valuable in how I was with my son. It was the equivalent of going to graduate school for me.
It's so important
Yeah.
for so many reasons. I think it's just a really valuable time to be able to watch some of that stuff. Yeah.
And I knew which therapist was a rock star, and I knew which therapist was doing a good job of maintaining skills.
Right.
And I, you know, so that when the team shifted, I knew, you know, like who was going to be good at this and who was going to be good at that, because every therapist has different skills.
Right, right.
And, you know, I got to see how my son progressed and to carry what was happening in those sessions outside the sessions. It's so valuable. And I knew he was safe too.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's very important, of course. And I always say I wouldn't do anything, like, you know, I know that if I was to do a 4-hour session, I would be pretty, I wouldn't be as good in the last hour.
You call
I
it
would be
baked.
pretty tired.
You get baked.
Yeah.
You're done. You're just done.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't ask anybody else to do a 4-hour session. I just think, and we do have certain cases where they just need to have 4-hour sessions because the child is, the rest of the child's time is blocked. But I don't like the 4-hour sessions. I'm trying to minimize them because I really do see performance dropping.
Sure.
Both the child and the therapist are just exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to get one more question in, but I don't think that we have time. Am I correct, Emily?
Go for it.
My earpiece isn't working at all.
Okay.
So there we have it. Okay. My son can't stand the sound of chewing or soft talking. What can be done about this? He goes into fits of anger and rage when he hears this.
When he hears chewing?
Chewing or soft talking.
Okay. Well, I would shape the behavior, so, and they're completely different behaviors, so let's just talk about chewing, I guess. And what I would do is probably, let's say, expose him to, you know, a very, very minimal sound of chewing and then gradually increase that. You could do the same with soft talking. If you videotape someone talking at different decibels, you know, so like very, very soft and very, very loud and everything in between, and then you gradually bring it down, your child will get used to it. And expose the child obviously at each level. But what would be more curious is to find out why your child can't tolerate that. Is it because he can't understand it? Is it because the sound really disturbs him? You know, what is the reason? So I'm not sure of the level of functioning of the child. Perhaps you can try to investigate that a little bit more and see what's actually causing it, because that would be very important to find out anyway.
Okay, interesting. You guys have written in a lot more questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I want to remind you that next Wednesday, the entire Ask Dr. Doreen is going to be devoted to anxiety issues, which will include a little bit of OCD.
It'll be a lot about OCD, because the OCD is sort of the portion that relates very much to autism, but I will explain more about how it's related to anxiety, of course.
Okay, and if you have specific questions about anxiety, you want to start writing those in during the week. We'll be reviewing them and picking specific ones. I know there's no possibility that we'll get through all of them,
I'll try
but
to
still write.
Right, and what I'll try to do is just present maybe a half an hour or something, 40 minutes maybe on the subject, and then leave at least maybe a half an hour for questions.
Okay, really important show talking about anxiety. That's next Wednesday during Ask Dr. Doreen. We thank you so much for being
Pleasure,
here and
always.
shedding
Very
so
nice
much
to be
light.
here. Thank you.